Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about race relations. White people. Maybe it's unfair to lay blame for the ugly and often violent history of race relations in the United States at the feet of one particular group of people. I mean, it's reductive, it's simplistic. But come on, if you were going to lay blame on one particular group of people, it would totally be white people, right? Look, I'm not ashamed of being white. I'm not proud of it either. It is what it is. But I acknowledge that the defining conflict of the history of race relations in the United States has been white folks versus black folks. And in that conflict, it has almost always been the guys who look like me who have been the assholes. And even today, as that conflict continues to evolve and steadily but ever so gradually abate, it's still usually white people who are the assholes. We're the ones who continue to work to try and disenfranchise black voters 50 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. And it's us who howl the loudest when we think that someone is playing the race card on us. I love that. Code language. One of the areas where race relations has evolved since the height of the civil rights movement is the vocabulary of racism. True, there are still people oblivious or caustic enough to use frank racial epithets in their language, but it's more common to hear people, especially those involved in politics, refer to, say, the inner city or high crime areas rather than the black neighborhoods. And people don't talk of white supremacy so much, they talk about things like states' rights. And it's not pandering to racists, it's the Southern strategy. This is still sometimes referred to as dog whistle politics, because phrases like that might seem harmless to the general public, but they communicate a much different, more racially charged message to their intended audience. And occasionally, when a politician does slip up and get caught saying something openly, unambiguously racist, that is treated as a scandal. But politicians are saying racist things all the time. It's just that most of us can't hear the dog whistle, and we don't notice. Maybe that should be the scandal. The experience gulf. Over the years, I've occasionally heard friends and acquaintances who are members of racial minorities describe their first-hand experiences with racism, times that they were mistreated or discriminated against because of the pigmentation of their skin. And when I think back on their stories, it occurs to me that I, as a white guy, have absolutely no idea what it is like to live in this country as a member of a racial minority. I mean, yeah, there was that one time when my buddies and I were the only white people in that Mexican restaurant, but I kind of think I shouldn't draw broad conclusions from that episode. Yes, I did feel slightly out of place at the time, but on the other hand, my tamale was fucking delicious. Anyway, I think one of the most unfortunate things about this experience gulf between white folks and folks who are members of racial minorities is that lots of people think racism is no longer a problem. They got the vote. They even got one of them elected president. What more do they want? There are people in this country, an alarmingly large number of people, I fear, who think and say things much like that. And that's really a shame, seeing as how racism is still a problem. And if you don't think that racism is still a problem in the United States in the 21st century, allow me to remind you that there is a high school in the state of Georgia where, as of this year, students were still attending racially segregated proms. Allow me to also remind you that sororities at the University of Alabama were just racially integrated in September. And if those two don't do it for you, maybe that's a little too anecdotal. I want to also remind you of the events of this past summer when the United States Supreme Court struck down the pre-clearance section of the Voting Rights Act because, racism just isn't as much of a problem today as it was 50 years ago. And within hours of that decision being read, states in the South, previously beholden to the pre-clearance provision, were moving ahead with plans to enact voter ID laws and redistricting plans that would disproportionately affect members of racial minorities. Yes, Virginia, we are still a racist country, and the most unpatriotic and irresponsible thing that a citizen of this country can do is to allow himself or his fellow citizens to believe for 1 second that we're not. Are things better today than they were 50 years ago? I think the answer has to be, oh yeah. Are things as good as they can be? Is our work done? Fuck no. And the sooner we recognize that and get back to work addressing the very real racially related problems that still affect the lives of millions of Americans, the better it will be for the United States and for everyone who lives here. The hardest part is only picking 5. Thanks for watching.